The night sparkled with Manhattan's dazzling lights. The event hall, perched atop one of the city's most luxurious buildings, was a spectacle of opulence. Crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceiling, tables were adorned with exotic floral arrangements, and champagne glasses gleamed under the golden light. New York's elite was in attendance, dressed in their finest attire, ready to celebrate the engagement of the year. Alexander Carter, heir to the vast Carter Enterprises empire, moved through the hall like a king in his castle, receiving congratulations and handshakes. He was the epitome of perfection. A tailored black suit, impeccable posture, and a cold gaze that seemed to pierce anyone who dared look at him too long. At 32, Alexander was the definition of success. His name graced business magazines, and his fortune was one of the most talked about in the country. But as he accepted the congratulations with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, his mind was working tirelessly. His engagement to Victoria Sterling, the daughter of tycoon James Sterling, was a strategic move to solidify a billion-dollar partnership between the families. The problem? He despised Victoria. Victoria was everything he loathed in a person: arrogant, spoiled, and obsessed with status. Her smile was as fake as the applause of the guests when the engagement was announced. To her, Alexander wasn't a man. He was a trophy, an acquisition to boost her social standing. "Alexander, darling, you're so quiet," Victoria whispered as she approached him with a cynical smile. She held her champagne glass with the trained elegance of someone who lived to impress. "Don't bore our guests." "I'm just savoring the moment," he replied, his tone as sharp as the crystal she held. As Victoria moved away to show off her diamond-encrusted engagement ring, Alexander sipped his whiskey, gazing at the city skyline. He needed an escape. This marriage was a sacrifice he wasn't willing to make, and with every second, the pressure on him mounted. That's when he saw her. Across the hall, Emma Miller was carrying a tray of champagne glasses. Her light brown hair was tied back in a simple bun, and the black and white uniform she wore seemed insignificant compared to the gala dresses around her. Yet there was something about her that caught his attention. Her posture was firm, her eyes attentive, and her movements precise. She seemed out of place in that world of ostentation, yet her expression exuded a calmness that contrasted with the chaos around her. Emma was the gardener's daughter, working temporarily at the Carter estate to support her family. When her father fell ill, she took on extra jobs to keep things afloat, splitting her time between college and work. Alexander observed her for a moment, an audacious idea forming in his mind. Perhaps Emma was the key to escaping his engagement to Victoria. Her simplicity and authenticity were everything that was missing in his world of appearances. But how could he convince someone like Emma to participate in such an insane plan? He didn't waste time. Leaving his glass on the counter, Alexander strode toward the makeshift kitchen, where Emma was arranging trays. The sound of his firm steps caught her attention, and she looked up, surprised to see the most important man at the event standing in front of her. "Mr. Carter," she said quickly, setting the tray down on the counter. "Do you need something?" Alexander stared at her with an intense look, as if analyzing every detail of her. "Yes, Emma, I need your help." The way he said it made her frown. "My help? With what exactly?" He leaned in slightly, reducing the distance between them. "I need you to marry me." Emma blinked, shocked. "I what?" "I need a wife," Alexander explained, his tone as pragmatic as someone closing a deal. "But not just any wife. I need someone to help me stop a marriage that's about to ruin my life." She stepped back, trying to process his words. "This is a joke, right?" "No, I'm serious." Alexander crossed his arms, making it clear he wasn't in the mood to negotiate. "You'd marry me temporarily. In return, I'd ensure your family never has to worry about money again. I'd pay off all your debts, cover your father's treatment, and give you enough money to change your life forever." Emma stared at him, incredulous. "You can't be serious. This is absurd." "It might seem absurd, but it's a good deal," he retorted. "You have nothing to lose, and for me it's the only way out." Emma's heart raced. She knew Alexander Carter was a powerful man, but she had no idea he would be capable of something so far-fetched. Yet his words echoed in her mind. "I'd cover your father's treatment." Her father, who had been on a waiting list for an expensive procedure they couldn't afford for months. "Why me?" she asked, trying to find some logic in his proposal. Alexander shrugged. Because you're the opposite of Victoria, and at the same time, someone I can trust to keep this a secret. Emma bit her lip, feeling cornered. Accepting his proposal meant getting involved in something far bigger than herself. But refusing meant giving up the chance to save her family. Think about it, Alexander said before walking away. You have until tomorrow. Emma stood there, alone, trying to process what had just happened. From an invisible waitress to the centerpiece of a game she didn't fully understand, her life had just taken a turn she could never have predicted. Meanwhile, across the hall, Alexander returned to his position with a cold smile on his face. He knew he had planted the seed. And now, it was only a matter of time before Emma said yes. The morning sunlight filtered through the windows of the small Miller household, casting a golden hue over the modest furniture. Emma sat at the worn kitchen table, staring at the untouched cup of coffee in front of her. The events of the previous night played in her mind like a broken record. Alexander Carter's words echoed with unsettling clarity. I need you to marry me. It was preposterous, unbelievable. Yet, as much as she wanted to dismiss the idea entirely, the promise of financial security and the guarantee of her father's medical treatment pulled at her resolve. Her father's frail voice interrupted her thoughts. Emma, sweetheart, are you all right? You've been staring at that coffee for ages. She turned to see her father leaning on the doorframe, his face pale and thin from months of battling illness. Guilt twisted in her chest. She forced a smile. I'm fine, Dad. Just thinking. He shuffled toward the table, sitting across from her. You've been working too hard. I don't want you wearing yourself out because of me. Emma reached across the table, placing her hand on his. Don't worry about me. I'll figure everything out. Her father smiled weakly, but the worry in his eyes remained. As he rose to go back to his room, Emma's resolve solidified. If there was even a sliver of truth to Alexander's offer, she had to at least hear him out. Later that day, Emma found herself standing outside the towering Carter Enterprises building, its sleek, mirrored exterior intimidating. Her heart pounded in her chest as she entered the lobby, a bustling hub of suits and business deals. The receptionist, a polished woman with sharp features, raised an eyebrow as Emma approached. May I help you? I'm here to see Alexander Carter, Emma said, trying to keep her voice steady. The woman's skepticism was palpable. Do you have an appointment? Not exactly, but he's expecting me, Emma replied, unsure if that was even true. After a quick phone call, the receptionist motioned for Emma to wait. Minutes later, a sharply dressed assistant arrived to escort her to Alexander's office. The elevator ride was silent and tense, and when the doors opened to the top floor, Emma's nerves nearly got the better of her. Alexander's office was everything she expected. Vast, minimalist, and expensive. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Manhattan, and a massive desk dominated the room. Behind it, Alexander stood, his commanding presence filling the space. He turned as she entered, a slight smirk playing on his lips. Miss Miller, I wasn't sure you'd come. Emma crossed her arms, forcing herself to meet his piercing gaze. I haven't agreed to anything yet. I came to hear more about this arrangement. Fair enough, Alexander said, gesturing to the chair in front of his desk. Take a seat. Emma hesitated before sitting, her posture tense. Alexander sat across from her, leaning back in his chair as if he had all the time in the world. This is a simple business deal, he began, his tone as cold and calculated as ever. You marry me. In return, I'll pay for your father's treatment, cover your family's debts, and provide you with financial stability. For how long? Emma asked, her voice firm. 6 months, Alexander replied without missing a beat. Long enough to convince everyone that the marriage is real, and to dissolve my engagement to Victoria Sterling. And after 6 months, we'll divorce. You'll walk away with everything I've promised, and I'll walk away with my freedom. Emma's stomach churned. Do you even care about the fallout? People will talk. Your reputation. My reputation is irrelevant, Alexander interrupted. People talk regardless of what I do. What matters is that I avoid a marriage that would ruin my life. Emma stared at him, searching for any hint of emotion in his stoic expression. Why me? Out of all the people you could have chosen, why pick someone like me? Alexander's gaze softened, just barely. Because you're untainted by this world. You're honest, grounded, and you have something the rest of these people don't: integrity. That's what makes you perfect for this." His words caught her off guard. For a moment, she thought she saw a flicker of sincerity in his eyes, but she quickly dismissed it. This was a business transaction to him, nothing more. "And what happens if I say no?" she asked, testing his reaction. Alexander leaned forward, his voice low and deliberate. "If you say no, I'll find another way. But let me be clear, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for you. I'm offering a solution to your problems, not just a favor." Emma's hands clenched into fists in her lap. She hated how logical he made it sound, as if she didn't have a choice. But the reality was, she didn't. Her father's life depended on her making the right decision. "I need time to think," she said finally, standing up. Alexander nodded, rising from his chair as well. "You have until tomorrow. But don't take too long. Opportunities like this don't wait." That night, Emma lay awake in her small bedroom, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. She thought of her father, of the bills piling up on the kitchen counter, and of the chance to finally lift her family out of their struggles. But she also thought of Alexander, his arrogance, his cold demeanor, and the way he seemed to view her as nothing more than a pawn in his game. Could she really trust him? And more importantly, could she live with herself if she went through with this? By the time the first rays of dawn crept through her window, Emma had made her decision. The next morning, Emma stood outside the Carter mansion, her heart pounding as she stared up at the massive estate. The decision she had made weighed heavily on her shoulders. It wasn't a choice she had wanted to make, but it felt like the only one she could. Her father's life and her family's future depended on it. Taking a deep breath, she walked up the steps and rang the doorbell. Within moments, the grand oak doors opened, revealing a butler who looked at her with polite detachment. "Miss Miller, Mr. Carter is expecting you," he said, stepping aside to let her in. The inside of the mansion was just as overwhelming as she remembered. Marble floors, grand staircases, and walls adorned with priceless art. Emma felt out of place, her modest clothes contrasting sharply with the lavish surroundings. Alexander was waiting for her in the library, a room that smelled of leather and old books. He stood by the window, looking out over the perfectly manicured gardens. When he turned to face her, his expression was unreadable, though there was a flicker of something, approval perhaps, in his eyes. "You came," he said simply. Emma nodded, her throat dry. "I've made my decision. And I'll do it," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "But I have conditions." Alexander raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Conditions?" "Yes," Emma said, lifting her chin. "This may be a business arrangement for you, but it's my life. I won't let you treat me like an employee or an accessory." A faint smile tugged at the corner of Alexander's lips. "Fair enough. What are your terms?" "First, I want everything in writing. A contract that outlines exactly what you're offering and what you expect from me," she said, her tone firm. "Second, my family's privacy is non-negotiable. No one is to involve them or draw attention to them because of this arrangement." Alexander nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Reasonable. Anything else?" Emma hesitated, then added, "And I want your word that when this is over, you'll leave me alone. No strings, no lingering obligations." For the first time, Alexander's confident demeanor faltered slightly. "You'll have your freedom when this is over. I can promise you that." Emma exhaled, relieved. "Then we have a deal." Alexander extended his hand, and after a brief hesitation, Emma shook it. His grip was firm and warm, and for a moment, she felt a strange sense of finality. This was it. She was stepping into a world she barely understood, and there was no turning back. The days that followed were a whirlwind of preparation. Alexander moved with the efficiency of a man used to getting what he wanted. His lawyers drafted the contract, ensuring every detail was covered. Emma spent hours going over the documents, determined not to miss anything that could put her or her family at risk. As the wedding date approached, the media frenzy began. News of Alexander's sudden engagement to a mystery woman spread like wildfire, leaving everyone speculating about the identity of his bride. Victoria Sterling, furious at being blindsided, made her feelings known publicly, fueling rumors and gossip. Despite the chaos, Alexander remained calm, as though orchestrating a carefully planned chess game. Emma, on the other hand, felt like a pawn being moved across the board. Each step of the process reminded her of just how different their worlds were. The morning of the wedding arrived, and Emma found herself standing in a small room at City Hall, dressed in a simple ivory dress Alexander had arranged for her. It was nothing like the lavish ceremonies she had imagined as a little girl. There were no flowers, no music, no family or friends, just a cold, transactional air that made her chest tighten. When Alexander entered the room, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, she barely recognized him. His usual arrogance seemed subdued, replaced by a quiet determination. He walked up to her, his eyes scanning her face as though trying to read her thoughts. "Are you ready?" he asked. Emma nodded, though she wasn't sure she believed it herself. "Let's get this over with." The ceremony was quick and formal, presided over by a judge who seemed indifferent to the significance of the moment. When it came time to exchange vows, Emma struggled to repeat the words, her voice trembling. Alexander, by contrast, spoke with cool precision, as though closing a business deal. When the judge pronounced them husband and wife, Emma felt a strange mix of relief and unease. This was supposed to be the start of a new chapter in her life, but it felt more like stepping into uncharted territory. Alexander turned to her, his expression unreadable. "It's done," he said quietly. "From this moment on, you're Mrs. Carter." Emma forced a small smile, though the title felt foreign on her tongue. "I guess we should celebrate." His lips curved into a faint smirk. "That won't be necessary. The press will have their story, and will maintain appearances. Beyond that, there's no need for unnecessary theatrics." As they left City Hall, the flash of cameras greeted them, reporters shouting questions about their whirlwind romance. Alexander slipped an arm around Emma's waist, pulling her close for the photographers. The gesture felt calculated, but the warmth of his touch sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. That evening, Emma found herself alone in one of the Carter mansion's guest rooms. The quiet was overwhelming, and the weight of what she had done pressed down on her. She had married a man she barely knew, one whose intentions were as cold as the marble floors beneath her feet. But as she looked out the window at the sprawling gardens below, she reminded herself why she had agreed to this. Her father's treatment was now guaranteed, and her family's struggles were over. For now, she had made her choice, and there was no turning back. In the distance, Alexander stood on the balcony of his room, a glass of whiskey in hand. He gazed out at the city skyline, his expression unreadable. For him, this was a victory, a step toward reclaiming his freedom. But even he couldn't ignore the strange, nagging feeling that his life was about to change in ways he couldn't predict. The days following the wedding passed in a blur of carefully orchestrated public appearances. Alexander and Emma were thrust into a world of relentless media scrutiny, their every move dissected and analyzed. Photographs of the happy couple adorned gossip columns, painting a picture of romance and passion that couldn't have been further from the truth. For Emma, life in the Carter mansion was a constant reminder of how out of place she felt. The sprawling estate was cold and impersonal, with its marble floors and gilded decor. It wasn't home, it was a fortress, and Alexander was its impenetrable ruler. One morning, Emma wandered through the mansion's vast garden, seeking solace among the perfectly manicured hedges and vibrant blooms. She found a bench beneath an ancient oak tree and sat down, letting out a heavy sigh. The weight of her new life was becoming unbearable. She missed her modest home, her father's laughter, and the simplicity of her old routines. Her solitude was interrupted by the sound of footsteps crunching on the gravel path. She looked up to see Alexander approaching, his expression unreadable. He wore a crisp white shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms, and carried a cup of coffee in one hand. "I didn't expect to find you out here," he said, his voice breaking the quiet. Emma shrugged. "I needed some air." Alexander sat down beside her, the space between them a chasm filled with unspoken tension. He placed the coffee on the bench's armrest, leaning back slightly as he regarded her with those piercing blue eyes. "You've been quiet," he observed. Emma glanced at him, her frustration bubbling to the surface. "What did you expect, Alexander? I'm living in a house that doesn't feel like mine, pretending to be something I'm not. It's exhausting." His jaw tightened, and for a moment, she thought he might lash out. but instead he surprised her. "I know this isn't easy for you," he admitted, his tone softer than she'd ever heard it. "But you agreed to this. We both did." Emma shook her head, letting out a bitter laugh. "I didn't agree to be paraded around like a trophy." Alexander's eyes narrowed. "Is that what you think this is? A parade? What else would you call it?" She shot back. "Every time we step outside, it's all fake smiles and rehearsed gestures. It's not real." For a moment, silence stretched between them, the only sound the rustling of leaves in the breeze. Then Alexander sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You're right," he said finally. "It's not real, but it's necessary." Emma turned to him, surprised by his admission. "Necessary for who? You, your business?" "For both of us," he replied, his gaze unwavering. "You may not see it now, but this arrangement benefits you as much as it does me." Emma stood up abruptly, unable to contain her frustration. "You keep saying that, but you don't know anything about me. You don't know what I've given up for this." Alexander rose as well, towering over her. "I know more than you think, Emma, and I know that sometimes we have to make sacrifices for the people we care about." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Emma stared at him, searching for a trace of vulnerability in his otherwise stoic demeanor. For the first time, she saw a flicker of something human in his eyes, regret, perhaps, or guilt. But just as quickly as it appeared, it was gone. Alexander stepped back, his walls firmly in place once more. "Don't forget why you're here," he said, his voice colder now. "This is a business arrangement, nothing more." Emma watched him walk away, her emotions a tangled mess. She hated how he could switch between moments of warmth and icy detachment so effortlessly. It made it impossible to know where she stood with him. That evening, a formal dinner was scheduled at the mansion, attended by some of Alexander's closest business associates. Emma spent the afternoon preparing herself with the help of a stylist Alexander had hired. The dress she wore was elegant but understated, a deep emerald green that complemented her fair complexion. As she looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. When she entered the dining room, the guests turned to look at her, their expressions a mix of curiosity and admiration. Alexander stood at the head of the table, his gaze locking onto hers as she approached. He extended his hand, and she hesitated for a fraction of a second before taking it. "You look stunning," he said quietly, his tone devoid of sarcasm for once. "Thank you," she replied, forcing a small smile. Throughout the dinner, Emma played her role flawlessly, smiling and engaging in polite conversation. She could feel Alexander's eyes on her from time to time, and she wondered if he was silently evaluating her performance. After the last course was served, Alexander stood to make a toast. He raised his glass, his voice commanding the attention of the room. "To new beginnings," he said, glancing briefly at Emma before continuing, "and to partnerships that defy expectations." The guests applauded, and Emma forced herself to smile. But beneath the surface, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being used as a pawn in a game she didn't fully understand. Later that night, as Emma retreated to her room, she found herself thinking about Alexander's earlier words in the garden. Sometimes, we have to make sacrifices for the people we care about. Could there be more to him than the cold, calculating businessman he appeared to be? Or was she simply clinging to the hope that this arrangement might be something more than a transaction? As she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, one thing was certain: the fragile truce between them wouldn't last forever. The days turned into weeks, and Emma slowly adjusted to her new life in the Carter mansion. The press had quieted somewhat after the initial media frenzy, but the scrutiny never completely disappeared. Every public appearance with Alexander was an exercise in perfection. Smiles that didn't reach their eyes, rehearsed gestures of affection, and carefully chosen words. But behind the mansion's grand facade, the cracks in their arrangement were beginning to show. It was a rainy afternoon when Emma found herself in the kitchen, a rare moment of solitude. She had learned quickly that the staff treated her with a mix of deference and curiosity, unsure whether to see her as a member of the household or an outsider. She often avoided them, retreating to quieter corners of the mansion. As she brewed herself a cup of tea, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway. She looked up to see Alexander entering, his usually pristine suit slightly disheveled. His tie hung loose and his expression was darker than usual. "Rough day?" she asked, surprised by her own boldness. Alexander paused, seeming caught off guard by her presence. "Something like that." Emma gestured to the kettle. "Tea?" He hesitated before nodding. "Sure." She poured him a cup, sliding it across the counter. Alexander accepted it, leaning against the marble island. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the only sound the rain tapping against the windows. "What happened?" Emma asked finally, breaking the silence. Alexander took a sip of tea, his gaze distant. "A deal fell through." "It happens." Emma raised an eyebrow. "Does it? You don't strike me as the type to let deals slip away." A ghost of a smile tugged at his lips. "You're observant. I spend a lot of time watching," she admitted, surprising herself with her honesty. "It's hard not to in a house like this." Alexander set his cup down, studying her. "What do you see when you watch?" Emma hesitated, unsure if she should answer. But something about the quiet moment between them felt safe. "I see a man who has everything but doesn't seem happy." His expression hardened, the brief vulnerability disappearing. "Happiness is overrated." Emma frowned, stepping closer. "Is that what you really believe? Or is that just easier to say?" Alexander's eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment she thought he might say something meaningful. But instead, he straightened, his mask firmly back in place. "Thanks for the tea," he said curtly before turning and leaving the room. Emma watched him go, frustration and curiosity swirling inside her. Every time she thought she was beginning to understand him, he shut her out again. That evening, Emma wandered into the library, hoping to lose herself in a book. She was scanning the shelves when a familiar voice broke the silence. "Looking for something specific?" She turned to see Alexander standing in the doorway, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He seemed more relaxed than usual, though his sharp gaze hadn't softened. "Just something to pass the time," Emma replied, turning back to the shelves. "This house feels like a museum sometimes." Alexander stepped into the room, taking a seat in one of the leather armchairs. "You get used to it." Emma pulled a book from the shelf and sat across from him, opening it to the first page. She could feel his eyes on her, and it made focusing on the words impossible. "Do you miss your old life?" he asked suddenly. The question caught her off guard. She looked up, meeting his gaze. "Every day." "Why?" he pressed. Emma hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Because it was real. My father, our little house, my routines, it wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Here, everything feels borrowed." Alexander studied her for a moment before nodding. "I know the feeling." "You?" Emma asked, genuinely surprised. "How could you possibly feel like that?"